Welcome everyone. My name is Simone Weeks. I'm the Manager of Financial and Corporate Planning at Frankston City Council. Really excited to be here today to welcome you to the FinPro webinar on gender equality. This topic is very close to my heart, and I'm excited to hear our speakers that we have lined up for you today. First, I just want to start with doing an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respect to elders past, present and future. I would like to extend that respect to elders of other communities who may be here today. So I just want to start off with an overview of what today's session is about. So the Gender Equality Act of 2020 does require local councils and other public service entities to take a positive action towards achieving workplace equality and to promote gender equality in our policies, programs and services. It is perhaps a bit of a new space for us in terms of how it affects our financial professionals in the industry, but today we're going to hear some practical examples of how we can give effect to the Act's essence and take on board some of the experiences of our panelists today. We are lucky enough to have three guest speakers who are going to help us on this journey. So our first speaker today is the Gender Equality Commissioner, Dr Niki Vincent. Hi, Nikki.
Hello.
Nikki will be providing us with an overview of the legislation and the implications for local government. I'm sure we'll hear about what her role is in terms of overseeing the implementation of the Act. Nikki has a wealth of experience in gender equality and organisational leadership, having been the South Australian Commissioner for Equal Opportunity. So welcome, Nikki.
Thank you.
We also have two CEOs in local government. We have Ellie Wasty from Bass Coast. Hi, Ellie.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
I understand that Bass Coast is showing great leadership in this space, and really keen to hear what your experience has been and how you're leading the way. We also have Evan King, the CEO of Ballarat here. Hi, Evan.
Hi, everyone.
And the same, we're going to be hearing from Evan about his experience at Ballarat and how they've been implementing gender equality practices. As usual, we will encourage you to ask questions, and so if you can pop them in the chat, or when we have a Q&A section, you're welcome to put your screen on and pop your hand up, and I have some of the FinPro exec here that will help me to identify where you are and if you have your hand up. As Gab said, we are recording this session, so let's get into it, and I'll start by handing over to Dr. Vincent to start us off.
Thanks so much. Thank you for having me. I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land from which I'm joining you today, and that is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and the Aboriginal elders of other communities who might be here today. So why is gender equality something we need to care about? Because when we ask people all over the world whether they think it's important, almost no one says it isn't important. So everyone says they think that equality, gender equality, all forms of equality are important. And yet we still have far too many people who find that their opportunities in life are limited by outdated ideas and stereotypes about gender and gender roles and so forth. And even in a country like Australia, we've got a hugely long way to go to achieve equality. We've got a gender pay gap that devalues the work of women. So nationally, women need to work an extra 61 days on average to earn the same as men. We've got an underrepresentation of women in leadership, even in female-dominated industries. We've got a similar underrepresentation. And we'd all know from what we've seen in the media over the last 2 years that sexual harassment is alive and well in workplaces, unfortunately, and causing an incredible amount of harm. And so, you know, there's a lot to be done. The World Economic Forum put out a horrific statistic recently, which was that it was going to take 135 years to close the gender gap worldwide. And I've said it before and I will say it again. I don't know about you, but I personally am not content to wait for over a century for equality. I'm not going to tell you my life story today, but as far as my career goes, suffice to say, I've had the privilege to hold some amazing roles and to work and lead some absolutely fabulous organisations. I also come from an underprivileged background. I was a teenage mother, I was a single parent of 4, and now I have 4 adult children, 10 grandchildren, 2 young adult stepkids, and I'm a full-time foster parent to a teenager from Liberia who came, who's been with me for 6.5 years and who came into my life when I was again single and had just been appointed to the role of South Australia's Commissioner for Equal Opportunity, which was the last role I held. And like other women in leadership roles, I've been asked often how I managed to have a successful career with all these kids in my life. And it's a great question. And sometimes I wonder how as well. But the thing is, though, we rarely ask that question of men. We don't even ask men if they have kids. Often when they're standing on stage in front of us, you know, if they've come to talk to us about something, we don't know about their background. We don't know about their family background. It doesn't come up. And if it comes up, it's an aside. And it's not something we go, oh, how did you do all of that with 4 kids? A woman should not. And the point is that we should be asking that of men. It should be men's responsibility equally to care for their children, to take responsibility for their children. And we will never have equality until we have that. A woman should never have to be a superwoman to achieve their career goals while doing the majority of unpaid work at home, because the men in their life should also be taking their fair share of the unpaid work. And what we do in our workplaces constantly is about trying to fix women to fit into those workplaces that were designed by men for men. And it shouldn't be about fixing women to fit into those workplaces. As Catherine Fox, who wrote the book Stop Fixing Women, which is a fabulous book and I can highly recommend it, it's not about fixing women. It's not about changing women. It is about changing the outdated stereotypes and the outdated structures that are designed to favour men in unconscious ways, because they were set up when often these structures were set up when it was a time that men were the breadwinner, and they often usually had a wife, generally at home, looking after the kids and taking care of the household. It is not like that. That does not reflect modern families, but our workplaces haven't changed accordingly. So to truly enable women to succeed, organisations have to address the systemic barriers to workplace equality. There's a lot of work to be done there, and I'm really proud to be leading the Gender Equality Act in the Victorian public sector, a starting place for this work. So why the public sector? The Victorian public sector makes up 10% of the state's labour force. Of the overall public sector workforce, 68% are women. So it is a female-dominated workforce, but we still don't have equal representation of women in leadership. The Victorian public sector still has a gender pay gap. It's not as big as the state pay gap, but it's 9.6%, which is 9.6% too much. Men earn on average $9,399 more than women. And the pay gap is the result of the uneven distribution of men and women across pay bands and roles. Women are more likely to be in the lowest pay band. So of 3 pay bands, 37% of women in the public sector are in the lowest pay band, and of the highest pay band, 44% of men in the public sector are in that pay band. So even when women in leadership, when women are in leadership roles, pay discrimination persists. And if you look at the Workplace Gender Equalities research on this, it actually often gets worse the higher up you go. There's a bigger pay gap for women at the top. KPMG did this great research. They've done it over a time series, so you can actually see the change, which isn't much, I'd have to say. But the last report that they did of this, as far as I know, is it's called the She's Priced Less report, which is a priceless title. They released the last one in 2019, so it's a little bit outdated, but not much. They look at sort of what are the components of the pay gap? What makes up the gender pay gap? And what they've found is, over to all of this time, hasn't shifted much at all, that gender discrimination is actually the most significant contributor to the gender pay gap at 39%. Now, when we think of the gender pay gap, we often think of, well, it's because women take time out to parent and look after others and so forth. That's part of the pay gap, but it's only 25%. So if you took out discrimination, you'd have literally that would translate into an almost 40% lower pay gap. And then if you look at parenting, that would take it down another 25%. And then when we look at workplace segregation, so that's so it's an industrial segregation, that contributes about 19%. So that is women working in industries that are lower paid, which happens when you have a whole bunch of women working in an industry. It is always lower paid. And so women tend to be in industries that are lower paid. And when they aren't, whether they are or aren't in those industries, when they aren't in those industries, they tend to be enrolled that are lower paid. So workplace segregation, industrial segregation. And this is where the Gender Equality Act comes in, because it's got levers within it to address these things over time. It applies to 300 organisations right across the Victorian public sector. So all of the VPS departments, all of the broader public sector, water boards and all of those sorts of organisations, all of the local governments, all 79 councils and all universities, 9 universities. It is the first of its kind in Australia, and it places a strong positive duty on workplaces to make progress towards gender equality. So it says gender equality is no longer a nice to have, it is a must have. And that's what's brilliant. Finally, we have legislation that says that after waiting so many decades, centuries, we're actually going to put legislation in place that's going to drive change. The other thing that's really unique about the Act is that it includes intersectionality. It's the first act of its kind to formally include intersectionality, and that's about our overlapping identity factors that compound inequality. So if you're both a woman and you're Aboriginal, that'll compound your inequality. If you're a woman of colour, if you're a woman who wears a hijab, that's going to potentially compound inequality or discrimination that you face. Our older women are going to face more discrimination, sometimes younger women too. If you're a woman with a disability, really compounding that disability discrimination that you might experience. And if you're a person from the LGBTIQ community as well. So when you're developing policy programs and services, we really need to consider intersectionality to better understand and meet the needs of all people. And our failure to do so can and has had long-term unintended consequences. And we don't want to keep perpetuating inequality in the programs, policies and services that we deliver to our communities, to the public. So it's not just about gender, it's about gender plus the other multifaceted aspects that make us who we are, that need to be considered. So under the Act, all organisations have to undertake a workplace gender audit. I'm sure you all know this. You've probably all been involved in some way, shape or form and have probably pulled your hair out from time to time across 7 key indicators: the pay gap, gendered segregation, sexual harassment, you know the stuff. Organisations submitted their audit data to me in December and we've just completed the first round of compliance checking. Took us a bit longer than we anticipated. I was hoping to have the data out and being reporting on it at International Women's Day, but we are a team of 17 now. I think we've been a team of 15 when the data came in, including me, and this is the first time we've done it, and we got a very variable quality data, I would have to say. So there's a lot of learnings there for us, and there'll be a lot of learnings for defined entities as well, and I'm happy to take questions about that. So many of you would have received, your organisations would have received feedback about whether you met the compliance or not, and if not, the opportunity or the requirement to actually fix that and resubmit your data. But you also probably have some other things that we've picked up in your data that, although we're letting through this time around, you have the opportunity to fix, and that we might be coming down a bit harder on organisations the next time around. But we're being gentle because we know it was the first time for you and it was the first time for us. And I would have to say the vast majority of audits were assessed as being compliant. We had a really good response rate. I had to make a phone call in the end, and it was to a local government, I would have to say, to about like, where's your data? We haven't got it and you haven't asked us for an extension, and that's brilliant. And we're even better for the gender equality action plans. You know, that process is ongoing, but we will have analysis of the data. We're anticipating that to be out in June. So I want to acknowledge the significant work that went into that data and collecting that data for the first time. I know it wasn't easy, and I know we didn't always make it easy for you because our team was doing this for the first time as well, and we sometimes got things out at the last minute, and I do want to acknowledge that and apologise for the challenge that probably created for many of you, and we certainly heard that it did. We've developed a fantastic reporting platform that captures 67 million data points, which is going to be amazing. So we're going to have this incredibly rich data as a baseline for how we see change happening over time through the Act. And so through that platform, you've submitted your data, we will publish your data, your organisations, members of the public will be able to go search that data and have a look at your organisations, how they compare to other organisations, looking at the sector as a whole and so forth. So, and then your plans will be published through that as well. So it's going to provide an incredible amount of transparency, but also accountability as well. So it's not simply a case, as you know, of reporting your data. Organisations then had to translate that data into action. So they actually had to consult with their workforce, with their governing bodies, and with their employee representative union reps, and then put any plans to address any inequalities into action. And those plans, many of them, apart from those that had requested an extension or received an extension, not all were requested, were granted. And those plans were submitted to us last week, on Thursday last week, March 31st. So congratulations to all of those of you who have submitted your plans. I'm sure you have been heaving a big sigh of relief. We received all bar two by the deadline, all bar two that were supposed to be in by the deadline. So it's exciting, really, like that there aren't more stragglers, and that's really fantastic. So I think it's a demonstration of commitment to the legislation and commitment to action. And then obviously you'll be now setting about putting those plans into action. And I know we're going to hear from Ali and Evan more about what they're doing in that regard. Progress reports every 2 years. So organisations will be kept publicly accountable for their progress every 2 years. You will need to make reasonable and material progress over the next 2 years, actually over the next year, because your progress report now, because of all the extensions that were granted, is due on the 31st of October, and those will be public as well. Gender impact assessments are also required for any new and under review programs, policies or services that have got a direct and significant impact on the general public. As I said, this will help you avoid creating or reinforcing on inequalities, it means you need to put a gender lens over the work that you do, the programs that you develop, the policies that you develop, and the services that you provide to the public. And there's lots of new examples of organisations that have done this and how they've done it on the Gender Equality Commission's website. So I'm not going to go through lots of examples, but I've got plenty. And there's lots of examples from local government. So we've got one from Portland Aquatic Centre case study. We've got Horsham Council's community grants where they put a gender lens over that and found that, in fact, they were gendered. There were gendered outcomes, and so forth. So head to our website for some really great examples. We've got a big research program going on. In 2021, we funded 5 research grants, which have all been completed, and we're just analysing the data, but that's to help us understand what should be best practice from a global perspective in terms of workplace gender equality. And we've got now 5 new grants out to help us understand how gender inequality is compounded for people who are Aboriginal, who have caring responsibilities, who have a disability, who are from non-English speaking backgrounds, or who live in rural areas, which was really, really strong push from women in rural areas as I sort of did my speeches around the state last year. And so we've got applications for those grants open until the 26th of April. And we're planning to create a gender equality research and knowledge translation hub, which will draw best practice research together. And then we will then help translate that back to organisations through our guidance materials and other and training and so forth. And we know that lots of organisations are grappling with the gender impact assessment obligation. We've just had a piece of research done for that on that, which will help us develop better support for organisations so that they can be confident that they're meeting their obligations. And for local government, obviously, gender impact assessments are an absolutely vital tool because you have a really direct influence on your community, and it allows you to do your work better. It allows you to understand the needs of your community better and deliver fair, equal and inclusive services. And we're not expecting you to have everything perfect all the way. We acknowledge it's a learning curve, and it's a learning curve for the Commission as well, but it is so important that we are starting this work to build fair and equal communities. There's a lot of ways the Act's got flow-on effects beyond the public sector. We believe that public money should contribute to public good. So we think we're doing a pilot at the moment for organisations receiving government funding, and we're asking them to support gender equality in what they deliver and in their workplaces. And so that pilot's looking into funding guidelines for organisations receiving government grant funding, including local government. And we're also scoping work at the moment for potential updates to the social procurement framework, which will help us leverage government procurement to better deliver gender equality outcomes in the private sector. That's a big thing. A huge amount of GDP is government procurement. And so that's how this Act will use what it has to really create change beyond the public sector. So it's using the buying power of government to influence positive social outcomes. And it's important that we're making use of all the levers available to us in the Act. And those are funding and procurement are critical drivers for change across the Victorian community more broadly. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. As I said, Ali Wasty and Evan King are going to share their experiences of implementing the Act, and then we're very happy to take further questions. So back over to you.
Thanks, Nikki. That was fantastic. I'm just going to open it up to see if anybody wants to take advantage of us having the Commissioner here and ask any burning questions that they have about the Act. I see that Bradley's popped something in the chat. I'm not sure, that's just an article.
Bradley, could you also put up a link to Invisible Women, which is my other Bible. In fact, it is my Bible, Invisible Women, which is, if you haven't read it, you absolutely must. It is chock full of all the reasons why we need to do gender impact assessments. It shows you the way the entire world has been designed by men for men, including medicine, medical field, you know, car crash test dummy, you know, that's car safety, the way that we snowplow our roads and footpaths, just anything that you could think of. It's really relevant to local government as well.
Thanks. I'll go and do that right now, and thank you for your passion.
Fantastic.
It's not your job, but since you started.
yeah. He's the admin today. Chen has her hand up. Do you have a question, Chen?
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, my name is Chen. I'm the CFO at Yarra City Council. I just have a question in regards to the intersectionality, which you mentioned in your presentation. I think we all understand that there are different forms.
You're breaking up. You're breaking up a bit, Chen.
Breaking up, Chen. She's frozen.
Yeah. Oh, what a shame. I know that was going to be a great question.
Oh, are you coming back, or are you going to maybe pop it in the chat, Chen, and we can come back to it? Yeah. Not working. All right, we'll try and get that put in the chat, and then we can come back to it. I think we've got a question in the chat from Nathan. We get caught up sometimes on when gender impact assessments are most effectively used. Keen to keep it scalable for small projects or admin policies also. Any thoughts on that? Yeah,
it's a really good question. It's where they have a direct and significant impact on the public, and we've got some guidance around that. If you haven't seen that, there's guidance on direct and significant, there's guidance on what's a policy program or service. So have a look at that, and you're absolutely right. And I can't see what you're on. Oh, it's Nathan. You're absolutely right, Nathan, that you do need to scale it up and down, depending on the sort of impact and the size and so forth. It's not everything, but it doesn't apply to internal. The requirement, the obligation doesn't apply to internal policies, programs and services that only impact your own staff. So this is quite separate from the workplace audit and the workplace gender equality action plan. This is really about your impact on the public. That said, there's nothing stopping you from applying a gender lens to your internal policies as well. That's another way that you can really deliver on your positive duty in general around gender equality. But it's not a requirement under the Act. Now, what we'll be doing over the next 12 months, now that we've gotten through the data and the gender equality action plans, is really beginning as a commission to focus on gender impact assessments and the support that organisations need for that. So this will be a sort of test year where we come in with greater level of support, more tailored support for organisations. We had those workshops that we delivered last year for organisations. We've got the guidance documents and the guidance materials up, but we absolutely understand that it's hard to apply all of that to very different policies, programs and services. So we will be helping organisations to do that better over the next 12 months. And then we've also asked Vargo to come in and help us evaluate what organisations are doing. So we're hoping, and they're seem really keen at this stage, but we haven't got the sign off yet, but we're hoping that Vargo will survey all of the defined entities to find out what it is they're doing under this obligation, and then do a deep dive into a few organisations across different sectors to have a look at actually what are they doing and how are they doing it. Now, that's not with a view to naming and shaming organisations at all. That is with a view to helping us get better at helping you get better, but with this really, really important obligation that's going to create change and deliver better policies, programs and services for our community, for the Victorian community. So, but over time, we'll expect you to get better and become expert at this, and for this to be business as usual. So we'll start, checking more over time and getting into the nitty-gritty more and expecting more of organisations. as you get better at doing that work. And that's when, if organisations are non-compliant down the track, we'll be able to use our compliance powers that we have, that we hope we never have to use. But at this stage, we want to work with organisations and help you get better at doing these things.
Fantastic, thank you. So Chen's been able to pop her question in the chat. So it's about intersectionality, and we all understand that there are many types of equality issues, but it seems that gender equality is the focus. And Chen is wondering why that is the case. Is gender equality the dominant issue, or is it just easier to action upon or focus on?
Yeah, I think gender equality is the critical kind of driver because it affects 51% of the population who are women. And then we layer the compounders over the top of that. So we're all women, but as women, we don't have equal experiences of inequality. There are just as men don't either. I mean, so there are other parts that that compound inequality, and that's why intersectionality is important. So we ask the requirement, the obligation is for gender equality under the Act, and then intersectionality is there as if possible, if you are able. And what we want to do is strengthen that over time. So at the moment, it's a new thing for a lot of organisations. They're just coming to grips with gender inequality. Not all. I mean, lots are really, really well down the track of this, but a lot of organisations are still kind of going, I don't even know what to do here. And so intersectionality was kind of like, oh my goodness, let me get my head around gender equality first. And then they kind of treat it as an add-on. What we're hoping for those organisations is that we've started to integrate those things together, and they're starting to think about intersectional gender equality or gender inequality. That's what we're wanting to do. But that's tough, right? That's not something that organisations have necessarily thought about. It takes pretty sophisticated organisations to be thinking like that. And I'm sorry that that is the case. It should never be the case, and it should never have been the case, but it is the case. So we're trying to educate organisations that aren't collecting that data about how to collect that data. And we've got new guidance up on our website about that as well, that was done in collaboration with Div and Vic Pillay from Mind Tribes, which is hopefully really useful, and we'll get better at that as well over time. But I hope that helps a bit, Chen.
Fantastic. That was a really good question, and it's really interesting how it compounds an issue that's already there. We might just move on to our other guests, and Nikki's going to hang around for our panel part at the end. So if you've got any other burning questions, you can think about those in the next 20 minutes. But we're going to hear from Ali Wasty first, our CEO from Bass Coast, about their experience. Thanks, Ali.
Thank you, everyone. Great to be here, and I am joining you from the land of the Bunurong. And firstly, to Nikki, thank you very much. Every time I hear you, Nikki, I learn something different, and it reminds me to go and have a look on the website and see the wonderful case studies that councils are doing out there. So I just noted those ones down that you mentioned. So thank you very much. Bass Coast Shire Council, its population of about 40,000, one of the fastest growing regional council per capita. And we have got a very unfortunate statistic in Bass Coast, and we're also representative of a lot of Gippsland in that our violence statistics are 50% above the state average. So not great at all. But what we're trying to do, although we're still growing, but we are a small regional council, is we've got a mantra to be part of something bigger and to lead. And that's why we've put gender equality at front and centre of everything that we do at Bass Coast. So while I've been here in the last 3 years, we've had a number of initiatives that I'm really pleased to share with you. And we can have an enormous difference within our community and our 400 employees who work with us at Bass Coast. But what I'd love to see is actually some of these initiatives be taken on by the sector, because to be honest, they're not hard to do. They're absolutely not hard to do. They've just got to be front of mind and have a little bit of passion and some action. And I suppose one of my attributes is that I am action orientated, and so I've used that to drive some change here at Bass Coast. One of the things that we did do is we started to look at our statistics, and what we saw we didn't like. So last year, and obviously all local government authorities are doing this now, is that we did look at our pay gap, and our pay gap is 18.6%. And so that means that $607 less is paid to women per fortnight at Bass Coast Shire Council. And why is that so? The reason why that is so is because women work part-time, and there are more women taking up part-time roles. But if you take out that, just on a base, so there is no reason, so full-time equivalent, we've still got a 3.1% gap. So although we're better than the state average, we're better than the national average, it's just not good enough. So what we did is we started to look at, well, what's the biggest lever that we can pull? And that one of the biggest levers that we could pull was equal parental leave arrangements. So the choice for women to stay at home, what we could do within our power, that was not a financial choice. So equal parental leave is now paid at Bass Coast Shire. So if you have a baby at Bass Coast Shire and you're an employer, whether you're male or female or however you identify, or you're adopt a baby or a child, you get 16 weeks parental leave. We also now pay maternity leave superannuation for up to 1 year. So that's already been taken up by a number of people who have gone off and had babies, which is really wonderful. One of the other things that we've done is we have in our recruitment policy, when you come into Bass Coast as an employee, is that you start at the bottom of a grade. So you start at a 6A, a 5A, 7A, whatever it is that you're coming in. And we're very explicit about why we do that. We say, and people, obviously, they like to bargain up. And as Nikki said, men tend to do this, well, on the outset, they tend to do this better, and there are a number of reasons that I'm not going to go into why, but they tend to have more success. So we're very overt with people who are coming in to apply for a position, is that we say we're going to start at a 6A or whatever that be, and these are the reasons why. And if there's any, I suppose, argument about that, we look at it and go, well, that's probably not a person that we want working for Bass Coast Shire. And to be honest, it's been met really, really well. So that's something that I would encourage all organisations to start to look at. So whether it be 6A, 6B, 6C, just have it flat. So it takes out the argument. It's gone. It's not there. And then it's obviously performance-based after that. But it's a really good signal as well about what your values are about and what you care about as an organisation. We have flexible work practices as of right. So this was obviously has been a little bit supercharged with COVID, but it was certainly there before. And so, for example, if an employee wants to have flexible work practices, and that could be days, hours worked, and they are not supported by their supervisor or manager, the supervisor or manager needs to get CEO sign-off to why that can't be supported. And as a result of that and flipping that, we've seen a lot more people, men and women, take up those flexible work practices. And that's also positioning ourselves as an employer of choice. So we have, as in the sector, it's really hard to recruit some positions. We're all struggling to get planners at the moment. We're all struggling to get engineers at the moment. We've got planners and engineers working all over Australia, but also in Bass Coast, from home, how it suits, when they want to work. And so it's not placing an extra burden on people so that they're doing caring arrangements while they're supposed to be working. We have to be careful around that, but that comes out in the nature and the quality of the conversations and having that cultural practice in place. We have conversations all the time about the importance of gender equality. One of the moves that got a little bit of press, actually quite a lot of press, and I ended up not in an argument, I wouldn't say, with Neil Mitchell on 3AW, but if I do listen back to the play, I should have gone a little bit harder, was that on making sure that any organisation who wanted to use our sporting facilities offered equal prize money. And that was not a decision that I made, because I don't see that kind of activity. That was our events person who knew that she would be supported if she had a conversation with the sporting group, which was a motocross. So motocross, people who go on fast bikes up and down hills, came to Bass Coast and said, we'd really like to have an event in Wonthaggi. And Janine, our wonderful events person, said, oh, and what sort of prize money are you offering? Oh, well, we offer this for the men and we offer this for the females. And she said, well, how about you offer both? And they turned around and looked at each other and went, what a wonderful idea. So that was not only a first for Victoria for that sport, it was a first for Australia for that sport, and it was a first in the world for that sport. But then she took the conversation a little bit further and she came into the executive leadership team, because I wouldn't have even known about this. And she said, this is what we've done. I said, that's absolutely fantastic, brilliant. We love it. Let's just make that part of the course. So if you want to do any sport on a council facility in Bass Coast, you must offer equal prize money. Now, I look at this and go, how easy was that to do? My fear is that a sporting group might look at us and go, oh, you're a little bit hard to deal with. We'll go next door or we'll go to another one. Well, all of local government as a capacity, we have a lot of sporting fields and we have a lot of sporting infrastructure. How fabulous would it be if all 79 councils made that as a rule? It didn't have to go to council. It was just in a pro forma template. Some of these things are so blindingly easy to make happen, but it's just having people and the culture for people to be thinking about these things so it happens in the moment. So that was really, really fabulous to see. One of the other things that we've had a focus on, and again, it's the statistics that come into it, is making sure that we are taking every opportunity to see place names named after women, so, and also having a real Indigenous focus as well. So when we did our first cut of this a couple of years ago, we realised that less than 3% of our field facilities, sports fields, roads were named after women. Some people said, well, how would you know? Because it might be just like Smith Street. And it didn't really matter, because most people assumed that even if it was female, it must be male. So that was something that was quite interesting as well. So with our Place Names Committee, it's been a wonderful opportunity to work with our community to really shine a spotlight on women of note, historical note, and also present day women, and our Indigenous community as well, and to see them recognised on place names. So I really encourage local government authorities to have a look at that as well, and just to do that audit as a starting point to see where you are. So there are some of the things that we're working on at Bass Coast, and I'll probably leave it there because I'm mindful of time, but happy to take any questions either now or offline as well. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks, Ellie. Some fantastic practical examples there. We might move on to Evan, and then at the end we can come back and the panel can be available to answer any other questions that you might have. But as Ellie said, if you want to follow up afterwards or pop them in the chat, that would be great too. So welcome, Evan.
Thank you, Simone, and that is certainly a hard act to follow with both Nikki and Ali on that, and I'm certainly madly writing down some of those things that Ali was doing, and you know, I think that's one of the great things about local government. We don't compete against each other, we learn from each other and we can share from each other, and I think that's a really important part. Nikki, I am a proud father of 3 incredibly independent, strong, ambitious daughters, and you know, it absolutely isn't a nice to do, it is a has to do. And they won't put up with a workforce that doesn't respect them, doesn't pay them equally, and doesn't provide them with the same opportunities. You know, we talk about having challenges of recruiting staff going forward. It's a, you know, an employee-driven market at the moment, and we've all got, you know, huge lists of jobs that we're trying to fill at the moment. If we don't provide the right workplace, we will never fill any of those positions in the end, because people will go to where they feel accepted, rewarded, and appreciated. So your comments around, you know, this now is a must. It's a must in a whole range of fronts, not just from a legislative perspective in the end, just from purely being able to operate. We need to provide an environment that will attract people to want to work in our organisations. So thank you, Ali and Nikki, for some great insights there. So City of Ballarat, population of City of Ballarat, 113,000, growing at about 1.7 to 1.8%. So we are a significant regional city that is certainly growing rapidly at the moment. Nikki made a comment before around the collection of data was challenging. That probably tells us something as organisations. If that data isn't readily available, then we really didn't have a great understanding of our organisations. And I put my hand up as well. You know, we learnt a lot from gathering the data, which would suggest, well, why didn't we have it already, and why weren't we actually using it to better understand our organisations? But that certainly has been a great opportunity. As an executive leadership team and a senior leadership team, we've still got some significant inequality there that we certainly need to address as a whole organisation. So we're an organisation of sort of 1,100 staff in the end, and then adding in, you know, a whole range of casuals and volunteers. The high level number, when you look at it, you say, well, we've certainly got equality there. It's not till you start to drill down into that data and have a look at what that data tells you that you truly start to see the inequity. And Ali's, you know, pointed that out very clearly. Once you start to look at pay gaps and you start to look at bandings and where staff are sitting within those bandings, so it certainly tells a different story than when you just look at the high level number. And I suppose what we've been doing is really focusing on fixing and addressing really the gaps in all of our policies at the moment, and gradually working through a fairly significant policy framework to make sure that that really does reflect the Gender Equality Act in the end. So, you know, creating, you know, gender equality action plans, gender equality and diversity and inclusion committee. So we set up what we call the JEDI, which I chair on a monthly basis, which really gives us that forum to start to take a lot of that policy work through. We did a prevention of violence and gender equality leadership statement. We put that on our website and through all of our social media, and I did a video statement that was attached to that. Obviously, it was an opportune time with the Gender Equality Act. We were working on council plans and municipal public health and wellbeing plans, so it was a really important time. Your first year of a new council is always an important time when you're doing a lot of those 4-year plans and strategies. It gave us great opportunity to make sure that the Gender Equality Act was reflected in all those policies that we were working on. We've set up a LGBTIQA+ action plan and advisory committee, and just appointed a whole range of members to that recently, and they're certainly hit the ground running, which is a fantastic opportunity to really get that advice as an organisation and as a council. I think we're all doing a lot of work on flexible work arrangements at the moment, and I think, you know, flexible work arrangements have been, you know, required from our EBs for some time, but I think we only ever danced around the edges of it and never really truly understood what it could mean for an organisation and what it could mean for gender equality in the end. So certainly doing a fair bit of work at the moment on being really clear around what our flexible work arrangements are, leave policies. You know, we went through our leave, all our different types of leave, and I think we had, you know, 26 different types of leave, which was just so confusing in the end. So really streamlining that and making sure that that gender equality lens was placed over it as well. We're also members of a whole range of different entities. So Women's Health Grampians plays a really pivotal role in our area around gender equality and prevention of violence against women and children. We're a member of their core alliance, which is Communities of Respect and Equality, and I sit on the leadership team of Women's Health Grampians in the pursuit of a whole range of work they do. Obviously members of Right Tonight, Our Ground, and Australian Breastfeeding Association accredited workplace. I suppose one of the areas, and I learned a really valuable lesson one day. I was sitting around a board meeting at Women's Health Grampians, and we were talking about recruitment, and we were talking about a range of jobs that were being advertised, and there were some senior jobs in there, and someone asked me the question, you know, do you believe your recruitment processes have any gender bias in it? And I said, no gender bias. You know, I'm really open, to anyone that advertises. And we went through the ad for the senior position that I had at the moment at the time, and they said, you know, is there anywhere in the ad where you talk about the potential to job share? Is there anywhere in the ad where you debug the belief that, you know, working in an executive role in local government means you've got to work 70 hours a week? You know, and they really challenged me on that recruitment, which was fantastic in the end, and really opened up my eyes, because it really is about, you know, I might read something and I will see what my biases allow me to see, and someone else reads it and reads something very different in the end, and what you think might stand out doesn't stand out, or it's just in my head and it's not actually in writing on the piece of paper that was there. And it was a really valuable exercise for me. We've certainly got, you know, and I'm not you know, we've got a long journey to go as we become a far more, you know, gender equal organisation. There's an enormous amount of work to go, and I think recruitment is probably one of the most significant areas for us, but will also become vitally important for us as we move forward as a modern employer of choice. So we're certainly doing a lot of work in our HR policy space at the moment. We've got a pronoun policy. You know, future plans really are around, you know, we're doing a bit of work at the moment on it with our community engagement team, and how we engage with our community to ensure that we are getting that broader voice. We're seriously undertaking audit of all of our classifications at the moment, to better understand, you know, the gap that exists. Ongoing planning and obviously implementation of the JEEP. So we've got, you know, 17 objectives across 3 priority areas in our JEEP. You know, the Victorian Auditor General's sexual harassment audit from 2020, we've adopted all recommendations out of that. So look, certainly we've started our journey. There's a long way to go, but there's certainly a lot of passion from within the organisation to you know, really ensure that we're creating an organisation where everybody feels equal.
Fantastic. Thanks, Evan. There's some other great examples there in a practical sense of what we can take on board. I might open the floor up to questions of the panel. I might kick off with just to our CEOs. Did you undertake gender impact assessments on your budgets or financial plans, long-term financial plans or revenue and rating plans, or do you have a plan to do so? It seems a little overwhelming to me of how we might put that gender equality lens over where our council spends their money.
Yes, we do. We did. And so the audience in this room, there's going to be lots of CFOs sitting in here and financial managers. When Basco Shy, we first raised the 20 weeks paid parental leave. It's the CFO and the financial advisors who crunched the numbers, and we're looking at what the cost was to the organisation to do that. I'd also encourage any of you who are thinking about doing this is to think about the cost of not doing it. So what it means in terms of the social cost, reputational cost, and missed opportunity. So for a small council, the larger the council is, the higher the cost, but the higher the opportunity and the greater the opportunity that you have to make that impact. So that's a direct call out to all of the CFOs and financial officers who are sitting in this call, which will be, given I'm speaking at FinPro, that'll be you. You're the number crunchers. So please just have that in mind and go into those conversations with thinking more broadly than just that financial bottom line for each year, because it's much bigger than that. This is game-changing stuff, and it does require courage, but I plead with you to be courageous and have those conversations with your exec. Just also note that comment around pushback from councillors with any of the incentives. I haven't had pushback from my councillors. My councillors are progressive. I do acknowledge that some councils are not as progressive as the ones that I've got, but I also believe that we have a lot of power in an organisation to do things that are operational in nature and that do not require council or endorsement. Use your power. Take that power and use it.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's great. Evan?
Yeah, so look, we haven't this year, but it's certainly on our action plan moving forward. And I think it needs to become part of normal business in the end. So, we do a whole range of, when we're creating a budget, it's why it takes 6 months to do a budget in the end. There's an enormous amount of engagement that is involved in creating the budget in the end, enormous amount of organisational input into it. If we continue to take it as, well, this is something extra we have to do, it really is a cultural attitudinal change in the end, that you want to do it because you know that it actually delivers, benefit to the organisation and the community. And we can't ever forget, we are here to serve our community, and these sorts of, lenses over key strategic documents and key processes is vitally important, because our community in the end benefits from that lens being placed over it. So certainly, we need to change our thinking around this. And I've certainly had no kickback from councillors whatsoever, and if anything, huge encouragement from them to really, continue to push on and embed this in the organisation.
Fantastic. It's good for our Commissioner to hear that councillors haven't been pushing back. We're just about out of time, so if there's no other questions, we might try and wrap up. But if you have, if you think of something afterwards, please just shoot it through to Gab or myself, and we can follow up with any of our panelists. But I might just ask Nikki if you have a last comment you want to leave us with, or a reflection on
yeah. Look, it's, you know, Ali, I'm a great admirer of the work that Ali is doing, and really, you know, absolute standout examples. She gives me great fodder for speeches whenever I need examples. I can talk about what she's doing at Basque Coast. It's so wonderful. And Evan, look, thank you so much. What you showed was a preparedness to be open and vulnerable. So you're asking the right questions. You're accepting that you don't always see what you don't see, and that you're using the data to drive change. So it was wonderful to have your examples there, and for you to kind of fess up about the things you didn't know, which is the attitude I think that we want to bring to this. We need to bring to this. So thank you both so much. It's wonderful to see what you're doing, and it does give me great hope. So thank you for that, Simone.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm sure this is just the start of our conversation, and I absolutely think we would benefit from some case studies of having a look at what some of the leaders in the industry are doing with their budgets and financial plans, because we can learn from each other, and we're all, you know, in it together, and help each other along. So thank you, Ali and Evan, for your time today. Appreciate it.
And can I say one more thing? I'm sorry to interrupt, Simone.
That's okay.
One of the things that I thought of is that we've got a gender responsive budgeting requirement for the whole of the VPS. So there's a unit that's been set up to spread gender responsive budgeting right throughout the Victorian Public Service. So as a result of this conversation and Nathan asking some questions in there, and I went back and had a look at the rest of the things that you were asking or talking about, Nathan. So thank you for that. I'm going to go and ask them, and we can see what guidance they're putting out for people in finance, in the VPS departments, that would probably be really useful for people in FinPro.
Absolutely, and we can share that with our members.
Yeah.
I think the more guidance and the more ideas that we share, the better off we'll be. But no, thank you everyone for coming along, and really appreciate your time, and hopefully you got something out of it, and look out for our next webinars, or I think we've got an in-person one, which might be a little bit weird, but it'll be great to see you face to face. So thanks everyone for coming along.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.